If you're one of the billions, and I do mean billions of people who can't even think about starting your day with a cup of coffee, you've probably had that nagging thought. Is this daily ritual actually good for me? Well, today we're going to cut through all that noise and get right to the science.
For years, the headlines have been a total roller coaster, haven't they? One week, coffee is a superfood. The next, it's public enemy number one. It's really confusing. It feels like for every single study that comes out, another one pops up that says the complete opposite. So, what is the real story? Well, here's the good news. We can finally move past those single, confusing studies. You know, the ones that grab headlines for a day and then disappear? Researchers have finally zoomed out to look at the big picture, combining decades of research to see what the total weight of the evidence really says. And honestly, the results are pretty darn clear. So just look at this number for a second. 201. What is that? Well, that's how many massive, large-scale meta-analyses were crunched in a giant 2017 umbrella review in the British Medical Journal. We're not talking about just one study here. This is a review of reviews. It's about as close as we can get to a final verdict on coffee and our health. All right, so let's dive right into the number one concern for most people. What is coffee doing to your heart? I mean, for a lot of folks, the fear of high blood pressure is the main reason they even think about quitting. This is the big one, right? It's the one we've all heard. The caffeine gives you that jolt, it makes your heart feel like it's beating a little faster, so it must be bad for you in the long run. It just seems to make sense. But let's see what happens when we look at the short-term feeling versus the long-term reality. And this slide, this right here, is the core of the whole misunderstanding. So yes, it's true. If you're not a regular coffee drinker, a cup of coffee can cause a small, temporary bump in your blood pressure. But here's the key. For those of us who drink it every day, our bodies are smart. They adapt, they build up a tolerance, and the biggest reviews of the evidence show absolutely no significant long-term impact on blood pressure. But hold on, because this is where the story takes a really surprising turn. The evidence doesn't just put the myth to rest, it flips it completely on its head. That giant review we talked about, it found that far from harming your heart, a long-term moderate coffee habit is consistently linked with a lower risk of developing cardiovascular disease. This chart shows you exactly how that plays out. See this? Scientists call it a J-curve. Notice that the lowest risk for heart disease isn't over there at 0 cups. Nope, the sweet spot, the biggest benefit, we're talking a risk reduction of up to 15%, is found in people who drink about 3 to 5 cups a day. Okay, myth number 2. Let's tackle this whole cluster of ideas that coffee is somehow draining your body, that it's leaving you dehydrated and stealing vital minerals. Come on, you've heard this one a million times. Drink a cup of coffee, then you gotta chug an extra glass of water to make up for it. The idea is that coffee is a diuretic. It makes you pee more. So you must be losing a ton of water and, with it, all these important minerals. But is that actually true? You know, this is just a perfect example of how science gets better over time. The old idea, it came from these really small, older studies, like one from 1997 that only had 12 people in it. But then, a much better study in 2014 took 50 regular coffee drinkers, tracked literally every marker of hydration you can think of, and their conclusion was crystal clear. The final verdict is in. For a moderate coffee drinker, coffee is just as hydrating as water. That's because the liquid in the cup more than makes up for any tiny diuretic effect. So go ahead, count that morning cup as part of your daily fluid goal. You have science's permission. And what about those minerals? The whole idea that coffee is leaching calcium from your bones, well, let's just look at the numbers. 4 cups of coffee might cause you to lose an extra 4 milligrams of magnesium. That sounds bad until you see your daily intake is around 300. It's a rounding error, a drop in the bucket. Same thing with calcium. And, here's the kicker. That tiny, almost insignificant loss of calcium from a cup of coffee, you can completely cancel it out just by adding 1 or 2 tablespoons of milk. That's it. So if you're someone who puts even a little splash of milk in your coffee, this whole concern is, well, it's a total non-issue. All right, let's talk about the scariest one of all. The one that really truly worries people. The C word. For decades, there's been this nagging fear that something about drinking coffee could somehow cause cancer. So this fear usually zeroes in on a chemical called acrylamide.
It's a compound that forms naturally when you roast coffee beans. And yeah, it's been labeled as probably carcinogenic. But, and this is a huge but, that's based on studies where they gave lab animals ridiculously high doses. The real question is, does the amount in a normal cup of coffee pose any real risk to a human? And once again, when you look at all the evidence together, the myth gets turned completely upside down. Large-scale human studies consistently find that coffee drinking is linked with a lower risk of getting several types of cancer. We're talking about a reduced risk for liver cancer, endometrial cancer, prostate cancer, the list goes on. Now, in the spirit of being totally honest, there is one thing you'll sometimes see mentioned, a link to an increased risk of lung cancer. But this is where context is absolutely everything. Think about it. What other habit do a lot of heavy coffee drinkers have? They smoke. And when scientists are really careful to separate the smokers from the non-smokers, that link between coffee and lung cancer, it pretty much vanishes.
Phew, okay. So we've busted some major myths about your heart, about dehydration, about cancer. So what's the bottom line? What's the one big takeaway from all of this research?
It really comes down to this number, 3 to 4. If you're going to remember anything from this, remember this. It's the magic number that just keeps popping up over and over again in the best research we have. This is what the experts are calling the sweet spot. Drinking 3 to 4 cups a day is where you see the biggest bang for your buck, health-wise. It's associated with the largest reduction in your risk of dying from any cause, but especially from heart disease. But, and this is a really important but, this advice isn't a free-for-all for absolutely everyone. The evidence is very clear that these benefits don't apply during pregnancy. In fact, high caffeine intake there is linked to some negative outcomes. And there's some reason for caution for women who are already at a high risk for bone fractures. So, to wrap it all up, for the vast, vast majority of adults, the overwhelming scientific consensus right now is that a daily coffee habit, as long as it's kept in that moderate range, is a net positive for your health. It's more likely to help you than to hurt you. So, the next time you're enjoying your morning cup, maybe you'll see it a little differently. Not as some guilty pleasure you have to worry about, but as a simple, enjoyable part of your day that the best science we have says is probably doing your body good.